Hello, everyone. This is Rich Michael Jones. Time for the Bible read for August 17th out of Nehemiah 12. For the dedication of the new wall of Jerusalem, the Levites throughout the lands were asked to come to Jerusalem to assist in the ceremonies. They were to take part in a joyous occasion, and their songs of thanksgiving and the music of cymbals, harps, and lyres. The singers were brought together from the regions around Jerusalem and the villages of the Netophathites. They also came from Beth Gilgal and the rural areas near Geba. The Amveth, for the singers had built their own settlements around Jerusalem. The priests and Levites first purified themselves, then they purified the people, all the gates and the walls. I led the leaders of Judah to the top of the wall and organized two large choirs to give thanks. One of the choirs proceeded southward along the top of the wall to the dung gate. Hoshea and half the leaders of Judah followed them, along with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, and Jeremiah. Then came some priests who played trumpets, including Zechariah, son of Jonathan, son of Shimei, son of Mattani, son of Micah, son of Zechur, a descendant of Asaph. And Zechariah's colleagues were Shammai, Azrael, Milalai, Gilalai, Maya, Nathaniel, Judah, and Hananiah, and then used the musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God. Ezra, the scribe, led his procession at the fountain gate. They went straight up the steps on the ascent of the city wall toward the city of David. They passed the house of David and then proceeded to the water gate on the east. The second choir, giving thanks, went northward around the other way to meet them. I followed them together with the other half of the people along the top of the wall, past the tower of the ovens to the broad wall, and then past the Ephraim gate of the old city gate, past the fish gate, and toward Tower of Hanel and onto the Tower of Hundred. Then he continued on to the sheep gate and stopped at the guard gate. The two choirs that were giving thanks then proclaimed to the temple of God where their places. So did I, together with the group of leaders who were with me. We went together with the trumpets, playing priests Elikim, Messiah, Memanin, Micaiah, Eloni, Zechariah, and Hanai, and the singers Messiah, Shemiah, Eleazar, Uzai, Jehoam, Malchiah, Elam, and Ezer. They played and sang loudly under the directions of Jezrai, the choir director. Many sacrifices were offered on that joyous day, for God had given the people cause for great joy. The women and children also participated in the celebration, and the joy of the people of Jerusalem could be heard far away. On that day, many were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the offerings, the first part of the harvest, and the tithes. They were responsible to collect from the fields outside the towns and portions required by the law. For the priests and the Levites, for all the people of Judah, took joy in the priests and Levites and their work. They performed the services of their God and the service of purification, as commanded by David and his son Solomon, and so did the singers and gatekeepers. The custom of having choir directors to lead the choirs in hymns of praise and thanksgiving to God began long ago in the days of David and Asaph. So now, in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah, All Israel brought a daily supply of food for the singers, the gatekeepers, the Levites. The Levites in turn gave a portion of what they received to the priests of the descendants of Aaron. On the same day as the book of Moses was being read to the people, the passage was found that said, "No Ammonite or Moabite should ever be permitted to enter the assembly of God, for they had not provided the Israelites with food and water in the wilderness. Instead, they hired Balaam to curse them through our God, turn the curse into a blessing." When this passage of the law was read, all those of foreign descent were immediately excluded from the assembly. Before this had happened, Eliashib, the priest who had been appointed as supervisor over the storerooms of the temple of our God, who was also a relative of Tobiah, had converted a large storage room and placed it at Tobiah's disposal. The room had previously been used for storing the grain offerings, the frankincense, various articles for the temple, and the tithes of grain, the new wine, and olive oil, which were prescribed for Levites and singers and gatekeepers, as well as offering for the priests. I was not in Jerusalem at that time, for I had returned to King Artaxerxes of Babylon in the 32nd year of his reign, though I later asked his permission to return. When I arrived back in Jerusalem, I learned about Eliashib's evil deed in providing Tobiah with a room in the courtyards of the temple of God. I became very upset and threw all of Tobiah's belongings out of the room. And then I demanded that the room be purified, and I brought back the articles for God's temple, the grain offerings and frankincense. I also discovered that the Levites had not been giving their prescribed portion of food, so they and the singers who were to conduct the worship services had all returned to work their fields. Immediately confronted the leaders and demanded why was the temple of God been neglected. Then I called all the Levites back again and restored them to their proper duties, and once more all the people of Judah began bringing their tithes of grain and wine and oil to the temple storerooms. I assigned supervisors for the storerooms: Shelmiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah one of the Levites, and I appointed Hannah son of Zachar and grandson of Matana as their assistant. These men had excellent reputations, and it was their job to make honest distribution to their fellow Levites. Remember this good deed, O my God, and do not forget all that I have done faithfully for the temple of my God and its services. In those days I saw men of Judah treading out their wine presses on the Sabbath. They were also bringing in grain, loading it on donkeys, and bringing their wine grapes, figs, and all sorts of produce to Jerusalem to sell on the Sabbath. So I rebuked them for selling their produce on that day. Some men from Tyre who lived in Jerusalem were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise. They were selling it on the Sabbath, so the people of Judah and in Jerusalem at that. So I confronted the nobles of Judah. "Why are you profaning the Sabbath in this evil way?" I asked. "Wasn't it just this sort of thing that you ancestors did that caused our God to bring all this trouble upon us and our city? Now you are bringing even more wrath upon Israel by permitting the Sabbath to be desecrated in this way." Then I commanded that the gates of Jerusalem should be shut as darkness fell every Friday evening, not to be opened until the Sabbath ended, and I sent some of my own servants to guard the gates so that no merchandise could be brought in on the Sabbath day. The merchants and tradesmen with a variety of wares camped outside Jerusalem once or twice, but I spoke sharply to them and said, "What are you doing out here, camping around the wall? If you do this again, I will arrest you." And that was the last time they came on the Sabbath. And then I commanded the Levites to purify themselves and to guard the gates in order to preserve the holiness of the Sabbath. Remember this good deed also, my God. Have compassion on me according to your great unfailing love. About the same time, I realized that some of the men of Judah had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Furthermore, half their children spoke the language of Ashdod or of some other people and could not speak the language of Judah at all. So I confronted them and called down curses on them. I beat some of them and pulled out their hair. I made them swear in the name of God that they would not let their children intermarry with the pagan people of the land. Wasn't this exactly what led King Solomon of Israel into sin? I demanded there was no king from any nation who could compare to him, and God loved him and made him king over all of Israel. But even he was led into sin by his foreign wives. How could you even think of committing this sinful deed and acting unfaithfully toward God by marrying foreign women? One of the sons of Jodah, son of Elishib, the high priest, had married a daughter of Sanballat and Horonite, so I banished him from my presence. Remember them, O my God, for they have defiled the priesthood and the solemn vows of the priests and Levites. So I purged out everything foreign and assigned tasks to the priests and the Levites, making certain that each knew his work. I also made sure that the supply of wood for the altar and the first portion of harvest were brought at the proper times. Remember this in my favor, O my God. For the second part of the read is in 1 Corinthians 11. Thank God for Jesus. And you Corinthians should imitate me, Paul, just as I imitate Christ. I am also glad that you always keep me in your thoughts and that you are following the teachings I passed on to you. But there is one thing I want you to know. The head of every man is Christ. The head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. A man dishonors his head if he covers his head while praying or prophesying. But a woman dishonors her head if she prays or prophesies without a covering on her head. For this is the same as shaving her head. Yes, if she refuses to wear a head covering, she should cut off her hair, all her hair. But since it is shameful for a woman to have her hair cut or her head shaved, she should wear a covering. A man should not wear anything on his head when worshiping, for man is made in God's image and reflects God's glory, and women reflects man's glory. For the first man didn't come from women, but the first woman came from man. And man was not made from woman, but woman was made for man. For this reason, and because the angels are watching, a woman should wear a covering on her head to show she is under authority. But among the Lord's people, women are not independent of men, and men are not independent of women. For though the first woman came from man, every other man was born from a woman, and everything comes from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it right for a woman to pray to God in public without covering her head? Isn't it obvious that it's disgraceful for a man to have long hair? And isn't long hair a woman's pride and joy? For it has been given to her as covering. But if anyone wants to argue about this, I simply say that we have no other customs than this, and neither do God's other churches.